The ballroom was perfect that night. Every chandelier sparkled. Every glass was full. Every smile was polished and practiced and completely hollow. William stood near the back of the room, holding a glass he hadn't touched, watching the kind of people he had never quite figured out how to become. He wasn't supposed to be at the gala. He had a babysitter on a timer and a 7-year-old waiting at home. But his company had sent him anyway. So he stayed. He smiled. He nodded at the right moments. And then he saw her. Grace. His boss. The most composed woman in any room she ever walked into. Standing near the far exit, completely still, with tears she was fighting too hard to hide. Before William could take a single step toward her, she was gone. No goodbye. No explanation. No word to anyone. Just gone. And somehow, William already knew, whatever had just happened to Grace tonight, by morning, it was going to cost her everything. William didn't sleep that night. He told himself it was because of his son, Eli. Because 7-year-olds had a way of waking up at the worst possible hours asking for water or monsters under the bed. But Eli slept perfectly that night. Still and quiet and completely unbothered by the world. It was William who couldn't close his eyes. He kept seeing her face. Grace. Standing at that exit. Chin up. Shoulders straight. Doing everything in her power to hold herself together in a room full of people who would have loved to watch her fall apart. He had worked under Grace for 2 years. 2 years of morning briefings and quarterly reports and emails that were always professional, always precise, and never once revealed anything personal about the woman writing them. She was his boss. She was efficient. She was respected. She was also, William was beginning to realize, completely alone. He had noticed it in small ways over those 2 years. The kind of things you only catch when you are paying attention to someone for the right reasons. Grace was always the first one in the office. Not because she was trying to impress anyone. The building was nearly empty at that hour. There was no one to impress. She was there because going home to silence was something she had stopped being comfortable with. She never talked about weekends. When colleagues returned on Monday mornings trading stories about dinners and trips and family gatherings, Grace would listen with a polite smile and then redirect the conversation back to work within 60 seconds. Clean. Practiced. Painless. She kept a single photograph on her desk. William had walked past it 100 times. A younger version of Grace. Standing on a beach somewhere. Laughing in a way that looked completely unguarded and real. There was no one else in the photo. Just her. Just that laugh. Just a moment that looked like it belonged to a different life entirely. William understood that kind of loneliness. Not because someone had told him about it. Because he had lived inside it. When his wife left 3 years ago, she didn't just take her things. She took the version of William that had felt certain about the future. What remained was a man with a son who needed him, a job he was grateful for, and a very quiet apartment that felt too big for 2 people and somehow still too small for everything he was carrying. Single parenthood had taught William how to read people who were holding too much. How to recognize the specific exhaustion behind someone's eyes when they were functioning perfectly on the outside and fracturing slowly on the inside. Grace had that exhaustion. She had been wearing it for a long time. He just hadn't let himself say it out loud before tonight. The next morning, William dropped Eli at school, stood at the entrance of the office building, and made a decision. He was going to pay attention. Not in a way that overstepped. Not in a way that made things complicated. Just, attention. The quiet kind. The kind that says I see you without ever needing to be said out loud. He walked to his desk. Opened his laptop. Pulled up his emails. Grace's office was dark. Her chair was empty. And for the first time in 2 years, she had not been the first one in. Something had broken last night at that gala. William could feel it. The question was, how much had already been lost while the rest of the room kept dancing? Grace arrived at the office 40 minutes late. For anyone else, 40 minutes would have meant nothing. A traffic jam. A slow coffee line. A morning that simply refused to cooperate. But for Grace, 40 minutes late was the equivalent of someone else not showing up at all. William watched her walk through the glass doors from the corner of his eye. She looked composed. Of course she did. Her blazer was pressed. Her hair was perfect. Her expression gave away absolutely nothing to anyone who wasn't looking closely enough. William was looking closely enough. Her eyes were tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. The kind of tired that comes from spending a whole night holding yourself together through something that deserved to break you completely. He recognized it immediately. He said nothing. He simply turned back to his screen and let her pass. The whispers started by mid-morning. William heard them the way you hear rain before it arrives. Distant at first. Then closer. Then impossible to ignore. Pieces of conversation floated through the office in careful, quiet voices. Colleagues huddled near the kitchen. Near the copy room. Near anywhere Grace wasn't standing. He caught enough to understand. The gala had not just been a company event. It had been a setup. A carefully arranged moment designed by two people Grace had trusted completely, her business partner of 4 years and the man she had quietly been seeing for the past 8 months. They had announced a professional merger that night. A merger that restructured everything. A merger that had been planned, discussed, and finalized entirely without Grace's knowledge. Her own partner had signed her out of her authority. Her own company. The thing she had poured 6 years of her life into, building from a single desk in a shared workspace into something that finally had a name people recognized. Gone. Restructured. Transferred. All of it decided in rooms she had never been invited into. William sat with that information like a stone settling in still water. He thought about the photograph on her desk. That unguarded laugh on the beach. The life that looked like it belonged to someone freer than the woman who now sat behind a closed office door managing a silence that had to feel deafening. He thought about what it cost a person to build something from nothing. The early mornings. The missed dinners. The things you quietly sacrifice because you believe in what you are creating. And then he thought about what it feels like when someone takes all of that and makes a decision about it without ever once asking you. He knew that feeling too. Differently. But deeply. By afternoon, Grace had not emerged from her office once. No briefings. No emails. No redirect of the Monday morning conversation back to work within 60 seconds. Just silence behind a closed door. William made 2 cups of coffee at 4:30. He walked to her office. He knocked once. Quietly. Not the knock of someone with an agenda. The knock of someone who simply wanted to make it known that the door could be opened. A long pause. Then, her voice. Steady. Professional. Careful. Come in. William opened the door. Placed 1 cup on her desk. Didn't sit down. Didn't explain himself. Just looked at her for 1 honest second and said, "You don't have to talk. I just didn't think you should be in here alone." Grace looked at the cup. Then at him. And for just a moment, the composure slipped. She didn't cry. Grace was not going to cry in front of an employee. In front of anyone inside these walls. She had made that decision a long time ago and she was not about to unmake it now, regardless of how unexpectedly kind 1 cup of coffee and 12 quiet words had just felt. But she didn't ask him to leave either. That was something. William sat down. Not because she invited him to. Because she didn't tell him not to. And sometimes, he had learned, that was the closest thing to an invitation that a person carrying too much would ever offer. He didn't ask about the gala. He didn't mention the whispers he had heard all morning. He didn't reference the merger or the partner or any of the pieces of her life that were currently being handled by people who had no right to be handling them. He just sat there. Quietly. Steadily. Like someone who had nowhere more important to be. Grace wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. Stared at the surface of her desk. And after a long silence that William made no attempt to fill, she spoke. "I built that company before I even had a proper chair to sit in," she said. "I used to take calls standing up because I couldn't afford furniture yet." William said nothing. He just listened. "For years," she continued. "I trusted him for 4 years." She stopped. Pressed her lips together. The composure was holding but only just. "I should have seen it," she said quietly. "That's what bothers me most. I should have seen it coming." William leaned forward slightly. His voice was low and even. "The people who hurt us the most are always the ones we never thought to protect ourselves from," he said. "That's not blindness. That's just what trust looks like before someone breaks it." Grace looked at him. Really looked at him. Not the way a boss looks at an employee. The way one human being looks at another when something true has just been said out loud in a room that needed it. "You sound like someone who knows," she said. "I do," William answered simply. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. She nodded once, slowly, and somehow that small exchange held more honesty than most conversations William had in an entire month. Something shifted between them after that afternoon. It wasn't dramatic. There was no single moment that announced itself. It was quieter than that. The way seasons change, gradually and then all at once before you realize what has happened. Grace started leaving her office door open. Small thing. Barely noticeable. But William noticed. She began stopping at his desk in the mornings. Not with directives or deadlines. Sometimes with a question about his son. She had remembered Eli's name from a passing comment William had made months ago in a team meeting. The fact that she had held onto it meant something he didn't quite have words for yet. He started staying a few minutes later in the evenings. Not for work. Just present. Available. In the specific way that felt like a quiet promise that he wasn't going anywhere. It was Eli who said it first. William had mentioned Grace at dinner one night. Just briefly. Something small about his day at work. Eli had looked up from his plate with the devastating honesty that only children possess and said, "Dad. You smiled when you said her name." William had no answer for that. Because Eli was 7 years old and completely right that it started with an email. William saw it first. Not because it was addressed to him. Because it was addressed to everyone, every single person in the company distribution list, at 6:47 in the morning before most of them had even arrived at their desks. He read it standing in the office kitchen. Coffee in hand. Still in his coat. He read it twice. Then he set his coffee down very carefully because his hands had started to feel unsteady. The email was from the board. It was written in the clean, bloodless language that corporations use when they are doing something that would sound ugly in honest words. Phrases like restructuring leadership and transitional period and in the best interest of the company's future direction. But the meaning was plain enough. Grace had been removed from her position. Effective immediately. Pending a formal review of her conduct at the company gala, specifically, her unexplained departure from an official company event mid-evening. The email cited unprofessionalism. It cited a pattern of behavior inconsistent with the expectations of senior leadership. A pattern. As though one night of quiet devastation was evidence of something chronic and calculated rather than what it actually was, a woman who had just been betrayed in the cruelest possible way and had chosen to leave a room rather than collapse inside it. William stared at the screen until the words blurred slightly at the edges. The office filled slowly that morning. And with it came the specific, uncomfortable energy of people who had already read something and were now performing the act of not having read it yet. Colleagues moved carefully. Conversations were brief and surface level. Eyes drifted toward Grace's office and then away again quickly, the way people look at accidents they feel guilty for slowing down to see. Grace arrived at 8:15. She had clearly read the email. The knowledge of it was there behind her eyes, controlled, contained, but undeniably present. She walked to her office with her shoulders straight and her chin level, and William thought she was the bravest person he had ever watched walk across a room. She closed her door. By mid-morning the details had spread beyond the email. People were talking now with less caution and more appetite. The story had grown in the hours since the email arrived, fed by the kind of speculation that offices run on when something dramatic lands in their lap. Someone said Grace had caused a scene at the gala before she left. Someone else said there had been complaints filed. The details shifted and expanded with every retelling until the version circulating through the building had almost no connection to what William had actually witnessed that night. He had witnessed a woman standing at an exit, silent, dignified, heartbroken, choosing to leave rather than let anyone see her break. What was being described now was something else entirely. William thought about Eli. He thought about his mortgage. About the school run. About the very specific financial arithmetic of single parenthood that left absolutely no room for noble mistakes. He thought about all the sensible reasons to keep his head down. To stay quiet. To let institutional machinery do what institutional machinery does and simply make sure he was not standing in its path when it finished. He thought about Grace walking across that office floor this morning. Chin up. Shoulders straight. Completely alone in a building full of people. He thought about 12 quiet words and an open door and a little boy who noticed him smiling at a name. The sensible reasons got very quiet after that. He knocked on her door at 11:43. Not with coffee this time. Not with quiet company and careful silence. This time William knocked with something specific in his hands, a printed copy of the board's email, his own employment file, and 3 pages of notes he had written that morning in the margins of his lunch break. Grace looked up from her desk. Her office had a different feeling today. The same furniture. The same photograph on the desk with that unguarded laugh on a beach somewhere. But the air inside the room had changed. It felt like the last hour before a storm that everyone could see coming and nobody had figured out how to stop. "Sit down, William," she said. Her voice was steady. Professional. The armor was fully on. He sat. "I was there," he said. "At the gala. I saw you leave." Grace said nothing. Her expression remained carefully neutral. "I saw your face before you walked out that door," William continued. "And what I saw was not unprofessional conduct. It was a person who had just been blindsided by people she trusted, choosing to leave quietly instead of making a scene in front of the entire company." A long pause settled between them. "William. They are rewriting what happened," he said. Calm. Direct. "And I am not going to sit at my desk and watch that happen when I know exactly what the truth is." Grace leaned back slowly. Something moved behind her eyes. Something that looked almost like fear, not for herself, but for him. "You don't understand what you're walking into," she said quietly. "These people have been planning this for a long time. They have the board. They have the documentation. They have a version of events that is already being accepted as fact. Then someone needs to offer a different version," William said simply. "You have a son," Grace said. The words landed with weight. Deliberate. She was not being cold. She was being honest in the specific way that someone uses when they care about the consequences falling on another person more than they care about their own situation. "You have a son," she repeated. You have a mortgage and a school run and a life that requires you to be employed. This is not your fight, William. I am not your responsibility." William looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said. "You're not my responsibility. But you are someone I respect. And what is being done to you is wrong. And I have spent enough of my life being quiet about wrong things because the timing wasn't convenient." Grace looked at the desk. At the photograph. At the coffee cup from yesterday that she hadn't moved. "I can't ask you to do this," she said. "You didn't ask," William answered. "That's the point." He went to HR that afternoon. He submitted a formal written account of everything he had witnessed at the gala. He requested that it be attached to Grace's review file as an official counter-statement. He signed his name at the bottom clearly and without hesitation. The HR director looked at him across the desk with an expression that communicated several things simultaneously: surprise, discomfort, and the specific unease of someone who had not expected a complication of this nature to arrive on a Tuesday. "You understand this could affect your position here," the director said carefully. William picked up his pen. "I understand," he said. And he signed anyway. That evening he picked Eli up from school 7 minutes late. Eli didn't notice. He climbed into the car already talking about something that had happened at lunch involving a lost football and someone named Marcus who apparently could not be trusted near other people's sandwiches. William laughed. Genuinely. Fully. In a way that surprised him with how light it felt. Whatever happened next, he had done the right thing. And somehow, in the middle of all the uncertainty and risk and very adult consequences bearing down on him from multiple directions, that felt like enough. It felt like more than enough. The review took 11 days. William counted them. Not obsessively. Just, he was aware of each one passing the way you are aware of weather when you are waiting for a particular day to arrive. He went to work. He did his job. He picked Eli up from school and made dinner and read bedtime stories about dragons and missing socks and all the small, important things that kept the world feeling stable when larger things were uncertain. Grace remained in her office. Present. Functioning. Giving nothing away to anyone watching. But she left her door open every day. The result came on a Wednesday morning. William was at his desk when the email arrived. He read it once. Quietly. Then he exhaled, long and slow, and felt something loosen in his chest that had been pulled tight for 11 days. The board had reviewed the counter-statement. His account, combined with 2 other colleagues who had come forward after William's submission, people who had seen his name on the record and found something in that act of courage worth matching, had been enough to shift the weight of evidence. The claims against Grace were found to be without sufficient foundation. Her position was reinstated. Effective immediately. She came to his desk that morning. Not by email. Not by meeting request. She simply walked across the office floor, and this time, the room felt different. Lighter somehow. Like a held breath finally released. She stopped in front of his desk. Looked at him with an expression that had none of the armor in it. None of the careful professional distance. Just Grace. Just the real one. The one from the photograph on the beach. "You could have lost everything," she said quietly. "So could you," William answered. "It's different." "It isn't," he said gently. "We both had something to lose. You just had less choice about it than I did." She was quiet for a moment. Around them the office continued its ordinary morning rhythm: keyboards, coffee, distant conversation, completely indifferent to the fact that something significant was happening right in the middle of it. "Thank you, William," she said. And the way she said his name carried the full weight of everything those 11 days had held. "You're welcome, Grace," he said simply. Things did not change overnight. They didn't announce anything. They didn't make anything dramatic out of what was quietly growing between them. William was not the kind of man who rushed toward things, and Grace was not the kind of woman who trusted easily, especially now, especially after everything. But the door stayed open. And the morning stops at his desk continued. And the questions about Eli became something Grace asked because she genuinely wanted to know, not as conversation filler, but because a 7-year-old who noticed his father smiling at someone's name had somehow become real and important to her without her planning for it. One evening, walking to the car park together after a late team meeting, Eli called William's phone. William answered on speaker without thinking. Eli launched immediately into a breathless account of something involving a school project about planets and a disagreement about whether Pluto counted. Grace laughed. That laugh, unguarded and completely real, was the same one from the photograph on the beach. William heard it and understood something quietly and completely. Whatever Grace had lost the night she disappeared from that gala, the betrayal, the position, the version of her life she had carefully constructed, none of it had taken the most essential thing from her. She was still in there. Warm and real and worth every single thing he had risked to prove it. Some things are lost so that better things have room to arrive. William hadn't planned on any of this. Grace hadn't either. But there they were, standing in a car park on an ordinary Wednesday evening, laughing about Pluto, and somehow, that was exactly enough.